here at Brew Bar downtown, and we're working with Centro to show you how to simply and easily brew coffee at home with an AeroPress. The things you'll need today: you need our AeroPress. If you don't have one of those, you can pick one up for about 35 bucks. We're going to use some coffee from Estate Coffee Company. Right now we're using their Honduran coffee. It's got some chocolate notes and light melon. It's really good, really refreshing. Something to pour your coffee into. You're going to need some filters which come with your AeroPress when you buy it. I like to use 2 filters to help kind of filter out more of it, to really make sure really clean cup. Filter cap, funnel, and some ground coffee. So I ground our coffee about a medium to medium fine, a little bit finer than you normally kind of do for something like just a regular coffee brewer at home. So just a little finer. If you aren't able to do that, that's okay. You can kind of tweak the recipe a little bit to kind of accommodate that. I also recommend getting a burr grinder if you don't have one already, or bringing your coffee to us. If you buy it from us, we can definitely grind it for you. If you do that, I recommend getting smaller quantities more often so it stays nice and fresh. But Estate or us, any of the places that you get coffee from, should be able to grind it for you too. And then you'll need hot water. A gooseneck kettle is ideal, but you also don't absolutely need one for this. You could just tip it off a pot on the stove if you really need to. But it does need to be fairly hot, just off the boil, between 195 and 200-ish degrees. Cool, let's get started. So if you haven't used your AeroPress before, there's 2 parts. This part here, this chamber, the brew chamber, has 4 dots on it, numbers 1 through 4. And then your plunger part. So we're gonna do the inverted method, which actually is not what's in the instructions in the AeroPress. So put the bottom in and plunge it up to just under the number 3. So it's gonna sit like this for us, this is why it's called inverted, because normally AeroPress instructions have you brew it like this. Then we're gonna pour our coffee in. So we're gonna use, if you have a scale, we're gonna use about 20 to 25 grams of coffee. Kind of depends on how much I'm looking for when I do that, but you're pretty much gonna fill it up to the number 2. So use this little guy, came with your AeroPress. Pour in your ground coffee, fresh if you can. And so if you're able to get it in small quantities, it'll taste a lot better when you're brewing it. And then just make sure it's kind of flat. So you can always scoop some out, or we're not being super precise today. Cool, that's about right. So the first thing we're gonna do is bloom the coffee, which is kind of just getting it all wet. It helps release CO2 that's in there, so it might, depending how fresh your coffee is, it might really kind of grow, and that's the bloom. But the goal is to just get everything saturated with water. And then when that's done, we're gonna fill the chamber almost to the top. That's gonna be about 150 grams total then of water that we've put in. We'll put the lid on and then push. We'll flip it and push. Before we put water in here, we need to rinse our filters though. So like I said, I like to use 2 filters, but feel free to use just 1. So into the cap, and then we're gonna give it a quick rinse. Just in the sink, or if you're gonna warm up the cup that you're brewing into, you can also do that. Just be sure to dump the water so that you don't get this in there too. So rinsing it kind of helps get any maybe paper taste out of there, but more importantly, it helps the filter stick to the cap. And then if you don't have a scale with a timer, which I don't at home, I just use my phone to time it. All right, let's get started. So coffee's in here. So again, we're gonna do the bloom, fill it up, put the cap on, give it a flip. Just pour water until everything gets kind of wet. It doesn't have to be super precise at this point. And then give it a stir, whether it's just a spoon, a little teaspoon or something. And just make sure to get all the corners so that everything's saturated in there. It'll be kind of like a thick sludge at this point, which is what we want. If your coffee's fresh, you'll kind of be able to see it blossom up and bloom. You can give it a sniff at this point. It smells pretty good. And then after about 20-30 seconds, you're gonna wanna add the rest of your water. So again, just make sure it's all saturated, everything's getting wet. And then just leave about 1/2 inch or so, probably between 1/4 and 1/2 inch at the top. Go ahead and put your lid on. Make sure it's on there nice and tight. And then gently push the air out. So when you kind of see the bubbles stop and then like liquids coming up, you know you're good. And at this point, we're ready to flip. So it's a really quick brew. So nice even pressure. This feels about right. If it's brewing way too fast, it's likely that your coffee is ground too coarse. And if it's really hard to push, it's not going anywhere, that means your coffee is probably too fine, or maybe your water temperature might be too low. But it's usually, if your water is off the boil, it's usually the coarseness of your coffee that's the culprit. So just push it until it stops. The plunger won't go all the way down because we did use quite a bit of coffee. Awesome. And the first thing I like to do is get rid of the puck so I don't have to worry about it later. Cool, then we got our coffee. So this is a little bit of a concentrate. At this point, you can add a little bit more water to dilute it a little bit, kind of to taste. If we were using a scale, we'd add maybe like 50 to 100 grams of water. Or if you like a lot of cream, I guess you could kind of do that instead. But just do it to taste. But I'd say this recipe makes about 8 ounces of coffee, so enough for one person. And there you have it.